Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar. My name is Paul Kirkwood and I'm the Head of Learner Experience at ACCA. I'm going to introduce our session today as well as our expert presenter Mikey Lynch, who is the Qualification Education Liaison Manager at ACCA. Now this session is designed to help students who are planning to take the Management Accounting ACCA exam. It's designed to build your confidence by providing both technical and exam technique guidance, and will do this by debriefing exam standard questions. I'm delighted to introduce Mikey Lynch, as I said, our Qualification Education Liaison Manager at ACCA. But I'll leave it to Mikey to introduce herself a little bit more fully and the session in more detail.
Thank you, Paul. And hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to this Get Ready for ACCA Exam Success webinar for the Management Accounting and FMA exams. My name is Mikey Lynch, and I am the Qualification Education Liaison Manager here at ACCA. And I hope that through this webinar today, we will help to get you ready for your exam and build your exam confidence by providing you with tips and guidance. Looking at the agenda for our session today, we will start by talking about exam confidence. We'll then move on to look at some exam standard questions together before discussing what study resources are available to you to assist in your exam preparation. Finally, with the remaining time, we will look at answering questions you may have submitted during the webinar itself. So a little about me. My name is Mikey and I am a chartered accountant working here at ACCA. I have worked in accounting education for over 10 years and my favourite exams to teach were management accounting ones. I enjoy creating learning support to help future members like yourselves achieve exam success. And I look forward to spending this hour with you to assist you with your exam preparation. I can see we have many attendees to this live webinar, which is great to see. And I guess before we proceed, it'd be good to know if you have already booked your MA or FMA exam. So I'll give you a moment to vote using the poll functionality you should be seeing on screen. Have you booked your exam? Yes or no? Okay, so most of us haven't yet booked our exam. However, 27% of us have, so I presume we are looking at preparing for the exam today by using this webinar. And on a scale of, we're just sort of thinking about how confident we are on passing the exam, I was just wondering, how confident do you feel at the moment? Yes, you're sure you're going to pass. You feel reasonably that it might expect to pass, or not at all, you don't think that you're going to pass at this point in time. Okay, so reasonable levels of confidence we can see here. So almost 70% of us expect to pass, and we've got some, a very small percentage, however, about 3% of us, we're sure that we're going to pass, and I really admire that level of confidence at this particular stage in your studies. So thinking about exam confidence first of all, the MA-FMA exam is challenging but achievable. The pass mark is 50%, so we're not looking for perfection, we're looking for competence. However, it's worth bearing in mind that this exam is the foundation on which performance management builds upon in applied skills. So whilst the pass mark is 50%, if you are looking longer term towards future ACCA membership, I would recommend aiming much higher. How can we go about doing this? Well, having a structured approach to how you're going to gain the technical knowledge will help immensely. You might consider creating a study plan and blocking time in it to practice specific questions or mock exams to ensure you cover everything. With question practice, working through the answers is also so important for your learning. By carefully paying attention to areas you went wrong, you understand what not to do next time and improve your exam technique. When you come to sit the MA-FMA exam, you will receive a balanced exam. It is always great when we come across a question that we deem to be okay. We should be aiming to collect all of the marks, but not get overexcited by seeing that particular question. It's all too easy to make silly mistakes, and we want to avoid doing that. We will come across what we might consider a tough question in the exam, and here my advice is don't give up. Work through the question as methodically as you can, eliminating answers you know to be incorrect as you go. You may need to make an informed guess, but hopefully you should be able to work to the correct answer. Lastly, you might come across a question that you find to be super tough. Don't let this throw you. Upon first glance, if you do not know where to start at all, you can always flag the question and return to it later. When you return to it, remember to not give up. Work through the question as far as you possibly can, and if you need to make an educated guess at the answer at the end, then that's far better than leaving the answer blank. The MA-FMA exam is comprised of objective test questions and multi-task questions. As a result of this, the exam will cover all syllabus areas. Therefore, during your studies, you should aim to have a comprehensive study plan that will allow you to gain sufficient exposure to and practice of the whole syllabus. Avoiding topics is not advisable, as they could easily appear in the exam. And as this is the underpinning exam for performance management at Applied Skills, this exam becomes the foundation upon which you will build your knowledge in the fundamental principles of management accounting to help you in your further studies. Once you feel like you have a good understanding of the topics, you should practice answering questions. Doing this will not only help to test your knowledge and aid the development of your understanding, but it will also help you practice your technique on answering the types of questions you will be presented with in the exam. Practicing questions will help to give you confidence in the topics that you know well and will help aid you to identify areas where you are weaker. You should not avoid topics that you find difficult in this exam. Being able to recognise your weaker areas should prompt you to focus your studies on those knowledge gaps in preparation for your exam. Ensure you read the questions carefully. Sometimes we are so excited during an exam, we read the question we want to see rather than the one that is presented in front of us. Give yourself a moment to take a breath before reading the question carefully. And once you've read the question, take care with your calculations. This is particularly important in number entry questions, where you are required to type your answer into a blank box on the screen. We must ensure we follow the instructions given to us. For example, note the rounding instructions, i.e., is it asking for our answer to be perhaps a certain number of decimal places or to a nearest whole number? Check whether the answer should be perhaps a monetary value. Is it asking us for a percentage or perhaps a number of units? And take care to notice if the numbers you're working with are in hundreds, thousands or millions. We must ensure that the figure we enter into the number entry box on the computer screen is in line with all of these factors. Don't get bogged down nor disheartened with tougher questions. As we said, if you come across one where you don't know where to start, you can always flag it for review and move on to one that's more manageable, one that will build your confidence. And let's return to that perhaps tougher question later on. And lastly, don't give up. Work every question in as far as you possibly can so that you can leave that exam room knowing you gave it your very best. There are no negative marks, so the worst you can be awarded is 0. Thinking about how to plan our time just next, the MA-FMA exam is 2 hours in length with 100 marks available, and the exam comprises of 2 sections. Section A contains 35 objective test questions, which are 2 marks each. So there are 70 marks available to us for Section A. In terms of timing, this would give us 84 minutes for the section, or just over 2 minutes per Section A question. Now, at first glance, that may appear not to be a great deal of time, but you will notice when you start practicing using exam standard questions that some questions may be very quick for you to complete, whereas others will require a bit more work. Section B contains 3 multi-task questions of 10 marks each, so there are 30 marks available for this section. In terms of timing, that will give us 36 minutes for the section in total. So something we might want to consider perhaps when we're getting slightly closer to our exam is which section perhaps do we want to complete first, section A or section B. So now we've talked a little bit about planning your studies and the format of the exam itself. I guess it would be good to know if you are thinking of studying or are studying with a learning provider or college. So once more, just using the poll on screen you see now, it would be great to hear what your plans are. Okay, so I'm really pleased to see that lots of you are already going to a learning provider. We have some who are not planning to, and we'll talk a little bit later on as to what resources are available to all students via ACCA global website, and perhaps what you might be looking to use to support your exam preparation, regardless of whether you are going to be going to a learning provider or not. Okay. So now we're going to move on to have a look at some questions. So we'll start first of all with some section A questions. So just up on screen we have one here, and don't worry, I'm not going to ask for you to vote on these. We'll just work through these together. So this question is asking us which of the following are suitable performance measures of performance, at an operational level. We've got return on investment, number of customer complaints, and market share. So when looking at this question, we should be aware that at the operational level, we are more concerned with the day-to-day running of the organisation. So these are often physical measures that turn the strategic and tactical plans into the day-to-day running of the business. So looking at the options that we have been presented with here, the number of customer complaints appears to be the only suitable measure. So in thinking as to what our answer would be here, I'd probably say 2 only, which would give us the answer of B. However, let's consider the other options that we've been given here. Return on investment and market share. What type of measures would they be? Well, they would probably be measures at the strategic level. So at the strategic level, performance is often measured by indicators that reflect what is happening in the whole organisation, but over the longer term. So hopefully you'll agree that the answer should be B, which we've just lit up in red just there. Okay, let's move on to another question. So this one is asking us which 2 of the following are benefits of budgeting. So we have A, it establishes a system of control. B, it ensures compliance with legal reporting obligations. C, it helps coordinate activities of different departments. And D, it enables and is the starting point for strategic planning. Well, if you were presented with this question in the exam, I'm sure that you'd be pretty excited about it. And here, I guess there's a danger of being overexcited and by reading through the options, forgetting that it's asking us for 2 benefits to be chosen. So here I'm choosing 2 out of the 4 answers presented to me. So let's start by working through them in order, perhaps. So first of all, it establishes a system of control. Yes, that is indeed a benefit of budgeting, because by comparing our budget to the actual results and investigating the differences between the 2, we can take corrective action and thus control. So A is one of the benefits of budgeting. B, it says it ensures compliance with legal reporting obligations. We should be aware that management accounting can be prepared in any format. So I'm unsure that budgeting would directly ensure compliance with legal reporting obligations. So I wouldn't say B is going to be one of our answers. C, it helps coordinate activities of different departments. Again, this gets a yes from me. By working towards a common goal stated within the budget plan, activities of different departments will be coordinated. And I guess even though we've chosen A and C here, and so we've got our answer, we will review the final option nonetheless. just in case it sways our decision making. So lastly, D, it says it enables and is the starting point for strategic planning. Well, we should be aware that whilst the budgeting process is part of the overall planning process, it is not the starting point for strategic planning. Our longer term planning process will start with setting our mission, identifying objectives and searching for alternative courses of action and so on. So for this question, my answer would be A and C. Okay. Let's move on to another question. So our next one here says, under which sampling method does every member of the target population have an equal chance of being in the sample? So we have A, haphazard sampling, B, systematic sampling, C, random sampling, and D, stratified sampling. And when I look at the question once more, I can see that this is the definition of random sampling. So our answer here would be C. But just to recap, let's go through the other options that we had available to us. So thinking of A, haphazard sampling, well, it's a method that does not follow a particular system for which the sample is chosen. The sampling happens completely by chance with no underlying random sampling there. B, systematic sampling, is a method by which the sample is chosen according to a random starting point, but with a fixed periodic interval. So for example, if I wish to sample 10 out of 100 people, I might choose the 5th person, then the 15th, the 25th, the 35th, and so on. And D, stratified sampling, this is where the population can be split into several well-defined groups. For example, if we were looking at students on the webinar today, perhaps we'd have students in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on. And within these well-defined groups, a sample could be taken from each, ensuring a representative cross-section is obtained. In the example of students, if we have, say, more students in their 20s, the sample would include a greater number of those students in the 20s. Okay, so far we've had a look at some discursive questions. We are going to move to have a look at some more numerical ones. So I'm just going to share my screen with you now to get some more questions there for us. So hopefully we should be able to see example 1 up on screen for us, another section A type question. And it says the following variances occurred in the last period. We have sales volume contribution, sales price, a total variable cost, and the fixed cost expenditure variance. And the question says, if the flexed budget contribution was $200,000, what was the actual contribution? Okay, before we get going with this question, just a very, very basic recap on getting to a contribution figure, and let's just consider what we have here. So sales less my variable costs should give me a contribution less my fixed costs gives me a profit figure. So that's an incredibly basic recap just there. But that will hopefully help me answer my question, or at least jog us along to it. Now, when it comes to working through numerical questions, I would always try to answer the question without looking at the options that we've been given. So we've been given 4 numerical options there, but to ensure that I'm going to work right through to the end, I always try not to look at them at all. So we have been given here the flex budget contribution as being $200,000. And we should know that the flex budget is calculated by taking out actual units and multiplying by the standard contribution per unit. So that is given to us. That figure, we are told, is $200,000. And therefore, having a look at the variances that we've been given first of all this sales volume contribution. Now, the sales volume contribution we wouldn't actually need to use to get us to the actual contribution figure, because we've already considered the actual units by flexing our budgeted figure here to get us that $200,000. However, we would want to consider the sales price variance. So the sales price variance, it's 5,000 adverse, so that means that our contribution would be 5,000 less than what we would have expected in that flexed budgeted figure. So that's going to be 5,000 less. Our variable costs variance is $18,000 favourable. So this means our variable costs were less than we expected that they were going to be. So that would be increasing our contribution by $18,000. This gets us to an actual contribution figure, adding that up, of $213,000. So that is giving us the answer A there for that one. Okay. As mentioned, if you have any questions as we're moving through, just pop them into the Q&A and we will move on to the next question. The next question, example 2, we just have up on screen now. So here we're told an accountant is using the repeated distribution method to reapportion service department costs. The following table shows the work she has done so far. Figures have yet to be calculated, and they're shown with the question marks just there. Okay. The question is, what is the total production overhead for production department 1 after the remaining reapportionment of the overheads of service department X? So hopefully, thinking back to our studies, we should know that service cost centres are not directly involved in making products. And therefore, production overheads for those service cost centres, they need to be shared with the production departments, which is what is happening here and what we're being asked to do with service department X. So here we're going to calculate the reapportionment of service department X, so this $600 that you can see here, to the production departments 1 and 2. Now, the figure that we're actually asked to calculate is this one here that I'm just circling. That's the one that we want. That's the answer that we're looking for, that missing figure just there. But we don't need to calculate everything that's got a question mark there. We do need to calculate this figure, the one above it, but we don't need to calculate every single missing figure just here. So what we're going to do is we're going to reapportion that $600 to production department number 1. So do just take a moment to have a think about that before we start calculating. So I mentioned we were trying to reapportion the $600 that we see for service department X, and we wish to reapportion to production department number 1 in order to come up with our answer, our total production overhead for production department number 1. So in order to reapportion that $600, we would have a look at this line here, which is looking at service department X, and I can see we have some figures here that are going to help us reapportion the $600. So just writing out a little working here. So try number one, how much of that $600 will be reapportioned there. Using the relationship we have in the second row, and I'll tap that in our calculator and see how much would be reapportioned of that $600. We should have $266.67-ish dollars reapportioned to production department number one. So adding this up, 60,000, add the 8,000, add the $266.67. That should be giving us, when we round to the nearest whole number, that should be giving us the answer D. Okay. Let's move forward on to our next question. So the next question, question 3, it says here that budgeted costs and revenues for an output level of 4,000 units are given below. It is known that after output level of 5,000 units, there is a step up in fixed costs of $1,000. So we've been given the sales price, variable costs, the fixed costs, and the profit figures up to the output level of 4,000 units. And we're asked here, what is the flexed budget profit at an output level of 6,000 units? Okay, so we had a little recap earlier of how we get to a profit figure. So my sales less my variable costs giving me a contribution, less my fixed costs giving me a profit figure. So first of all, let's calculate our sales at 6,000 units. So 6,000 units, if we're selling each unit at $30 each, that's giving us $180,000 of sales. Next, let's calculate our variable cost. So again, 6,000 units at a variable cost of $18 per unit. That's giving us $108,000. And we know sales less our variable costs gives us contribution. So the $180,000 minus $108,000 gives us a contribution of $72,000. Next, deducting our fixed costs. And almost making the mistake there that I was about to mention not to make. So we were told that this level, 4,000 units, the fixed cost would be $4 per unit. And then after that level, there would be a stepped increase of $1,000 to our fixed costs. So our fixed costs would be $17,000. A contribution of $72,000 less the fixed cost of $17,000 is giving us a profit of $55,000. So that's giving us the answer here of C. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Our next question here says that a company borrows $10,000 repayable in 5 years' time and immediately uses the loan to repay its overdraft. What would be the effect on the company's capital gearing and current ratios? So answering this question successfully relies upon knowing how to calculate these ratios and applying them to this scenario that we've been given here. So first of all, capital gearing and capital gearing ratios. In your mind, you're probably thinking, oh, it's debt over equity or debt over debt plus equity. But when we say debt, what do we mean? Well, when we're calculating capital gearing ratios, that debt is my non-current liabilities. So it's my non-current liabilities over the ordinary shareholders' funds. Okay. So when I look at the scenario that I've been given here, I'm told that we're borrowing $10,000 repayable in 5 years' time. So that loan, that's a long-term loan that's payable in the long term. And so therefore that is going to increase my non-current liabilities. And therefore that's going to increase my capital gearing ratio. So already I can see that the answer is not going to be C and it's not going to be D. However, it does rely upon me knowing how to calculate the current ratio. So thinking of a current ratio, probably one that sits more easier in your mind, that's your current assets divided by your current liabilities. Now, in the scenario that we've been presented with here, we're told that we use that loan to repay our overdraft. And our overdraft, that's a type of current liability. So that's decreasing our current liabilities. But thinking about the relationship here, that's going to have the effect of increasing our current ratio. So our answer here is going to be A. Okay, let's move on to the last question for section A together. So in this question, we're told that the following observations of output and cost have been made. We've got 2 output levels and we've got 2 costs. So you're probably already screaming in your mind, high-low method potentially. We're also told here it is known that at output levels above 15,000 units, variable cost per unit drops by $1 per unit for all subsequent units produced. Okay, so there's a little bit of a curveball in there. What is the variable cost for each unit of output above 15,000 units? So variable cost can be calculated using the high-low method, as we're most likely very happy with knowing. But this is providing that there's no change in that variable cost per unit. So before we can proceed in using the method, we must adjust the total cost here at the 20,000 unit output here before we can proceed to use that method. So let's adjust this figure, this $68,000 first of all. So coming up with the total cost. So total cost for 20,000 units, just adjusting that. We've been told here that the total cost is $68,000, but this has taken into consideration that per unit drop by $1. Okay, and that is for output levels above 15,000 units. So we do want to add that back. So for the 5,000 units, we do want to add back the $1 that has been saved. So this is giving me a total cost for 20,000 units of $73,000. That's adjusted back to take into consideration that variable cost per unit drop. So now we've got that figure, that 73,000, we can go ahead and use the high-low method as we've probably done several times before. We should know that to calculate the variable cost per unit, it is the change in cost divided by the change in units. So the change in cost from high to low, that's the $73,000. The lowest cost, $39,400, divided by the change in units, so the difference between the 20,000 and the 8,000 units. And so tapping that into our calculator, we should get a variable cost per unit of $2 must be my answer. But then we must remember that The question is saying, what is the variable cost per unit for each unit of output above 15,000 units? Now, the variable cost per unit is $2.80 up to 15,000 units. But above that, we have this unit drop by $1 per unit. So we must remember to take off that dollar. So that is going to give us $1.80 as our answer. The answer here is A. So those are the Section A questions that I wanted to go through with you today. And as we mentioned so far, just pop your questions that you might have into the Q&A, and we'll come back to you on them as we're progressing or potentially at the end if we do have time. Now we're going to move on to Section B. So, Section B will contain 3 multi-task questions. There will be one on each of the following syllabus areas, so budgeting, standard costing, and performance measurement. You will be required to answer questions in a variety of objective test formats, such as picking the correct answer from multiple choices presented to you, choosing the correct options from drop-down lists, or on a diagram or graph potentially. We've mentioned already that exam practice is crucial, but also is using a bit of your own common sense in questioning the answer that you produce. We can all easily slip when tapping figures into our calculator, so don't forget to question the validity of the answer that you're producing. There's a great example on screen now. So here, when calculating a ratio, if you came out with an inventory days figure of 27 million days, you should ideally think twice on that one, as it's unlikely that a company would hold inventory for that period of time before selling it. Moving further down onto the next slide. Most of the multitask questions, they are scenario-based in Section B. Some of the requirements test the knowledge of specific topics, whereas other questions will require more application. There's no evidence to suggest that questions in Section B pose more difficulty than those in Section A. However, you may take longer to attempt Section B as there's more information to read. It's therefore imperative that you practice as many different styles of questions as you can so you can learn to manage your time efficiently. Up on screen now, you will see some of the common problems highlighted from Section B questions. Okay, we are going to move on to have a look at a Section B question together. And up on screen, we have a longer one here, so quite a lot of information for us to sift through. And some of you who perhaps are already practicing with our specimen exams, you may recognise this format of question. This is taken from specimen exam. It's a Section B question. It's question number 36. So if you're thinking about going and practicing this one, or you want to note down where can you find this question again, obviously these slides will be made available to you and are available to you. But if you want to practice this one using that exam functionality, please go and have a look at the specimen exam for this one particularly. So we'll start by having just a read through just to get a feel for this question. We're told here that cab company owns and runs 350 taxis and had sales of $10 million in the last year. Cabco is considering introducing a new computerized taxi tracking system. The expected costs and benefits of the new computerized tracking system are as follows. The system would cost $2.1 million to implement. Depreciation would be provided at $420,000 per annum. $75,000 has already been spent on staff training in order to evaluate the potential of the new system. Further training costs of $425,000 would be required in the first year if the new system is implemented. Sales are expected to rise to $11 million in year one if the system is implemented, and thereafter increasing by 5% per annum. If the new system is not implemented, sales will be expected to increase by $200,000 per annum. Despite increased sales, savings in vehicle running costs are expected as a result of the new system, and these are estimated at 1% of total sales. 6 new members of staff will be recruited to manage the new system at a total cost of $120,000 per annum. cab company would have to take out a maintenance contract for the new system at a cost of $75,000 per annum for 5 years. Interest on money borrowed to finance the project would be $150,000 per annum. Cab company's cost of capital is 10% per annum. Okay, so there's quite a lot of material there for us to go through. Let's have a look at the tasks that we are presented with here. So, first of all, task 1. In order to determine whether a computerized tracking system will be introduced, can you indicate whether each of the following is a relevant or an irrelevant cost for a net present value evaluation? Okay, so we're trying to mark these up as relevant or irrelevant. Now here we have taken screenshots from this exam question, but as you can see you have a little drop down, and that's where you would pick irrelevant or relevant as your answer. Now there's a lot of information for us to sift through here, so we're just going to be moving back and forth between the question and this task, but let's take them one at a time. So $2.1 million, the computerized tracking system investment, is that going to be a relevant or an irrelevant cost when we're looking at calculating our net present value? Well, here in part 1, this is where it is mentioned. So this is the system that we are considering implementing. And so if we go ahead and we proceed with taking on this project, then yes, that's going to be a relevant future cash flow that we would need to consider. So this is going to be relevant. I'm just going to put an R there for relevant. The next one, I think almost a gift of a question, depreciation of $420,000 in each of the 5 years. We should know that depreciation is a non-cash item, and therefore we would happily mark this as irrelevant. Next, the staff training costs of $425,000. I'm going to need to go back and have a look at that. And I can see that this was in part 3 of the information just here. Further training costs of $425,000 would be required in the first year if the new system is implemented. So if we proceed with this project, this is a cost that we're going to incur. Therefore, this is going to be a relevant cost. The next one, new staff, total salary of $120,000 per annum. Again, let's go back and find that. That's down here in part 6 of the information. So 6 new members of staff will be recruited to manage the new system at a total cost of $120,000 per annum. That's obviously if we go ahead with the project. So again, that is going to be a relevant cost. Next, staff training of $75,000. Going to find that. This is up here in part 3 of the information. It says here $75,000. Oh, it has already been spent. If it's already been spent before we've made that decision to proceed with this project, then that is a sunk cost. And if it's a sunk cost, then that's going to be irrelevant. Lastly, the interest cost of $150,000 per annum. Again, going back to the question. Let's see where that is. Here we go. That's down near the bottom, part 8. Now, we know that when we look at calculating net present value, it's discounted at the company's cost of capital, which already accounts for the return required by the company's debt provider. Therefore, that is going to be an irrelevant cost. So that's task 1. That's task 1 of this section B multitask question. Let's move on and have a look at task 2. Some calculations. So here we are asked to calculate the following values if the computerized tracking system is implemented. So first of all, the incremental sales in year 1. So let's go and have a look at that first of all. Incremental sales in year 1 if we go ahead and implement that tracking system. So sales. I can see that we had sales of 10 million in the first year. So we're told this up here. And trying to find more information about sales, we come to part 4. Sales are expected to rise to 11 million in year 1 if we implement the new system. Thereafter, it's going to increase, but we're only asked about year 1 in this task. If the new system is not implemented, we're told that sales will be expected to increase by 200,000 per annum. So let's just go and do a little working. Just to make that easy, I'm just going to label that as A over here and down here. So if we proceed with the investment, then we know that our sales are going to be 11 million. And without investment, well, it's going to be the original $10 million of sales plus 200,000. So that's going to give me 10,200,000. So we have incremental sales of 800,000 here. So that's going to be our answer. Let's move on to part B. The savings in vehicle running costs in year 1. Now this is going to need to go back to the question and have a little look at the information. So savings in vehicle running costs in year 1. I can see if we go down to part 5 of the information, it says here, despite increased sales, savings in vehicle running costs are expected as a result of the new system. These are estimated to be 1% of total sales. So 1% of total sales, the total sales were 11 million. That's what we've already used in part A. So it's going to be 1% of the 11 million. That's going to give us $110,000. Lastly, part C, calculating the present value of the maintenance costs over the life of the contract. And we're asked to give our figure here to the nearest thousand. Okay, maintenance costs therefore. Let's go and find them. So I can see part 7 of the information tells us that we would have to take out a maintenance contract for the new system at a cost of $75,000 per annum for 5 years. Something else to notice here is that our cost of capital figure, it's 10% per annum. So let's go and complete our little calculation here. So maintenance costs, there's 75,000 for 5 years. And we know that our cost of capital is 10%. So this is the point where you would start to use your formula sheet in your exam. And I'm afraid you're just going to have to trust me that I'm looking it up right now and that I am able to look up 5 years. I'm looking up the annuity factor, where we have a cost of capital of 10%. And when I look at that annuity factor in the table, I'm coming to the figure of 3.791. So if you want to check that you can use your formula sheet and those maths tables, please do. And just note that number down. If we were looking at 5 years, cost of capital of 10%, we should be coming to that figure. So that's giving me my answer of $284,325. However, just note that the answer, they're asking us to give our answer to the nearest thousand. So that's going to give me 284,000. Okay, we are starting to near our hour's time. So I'm just going to leave that section B question there for the moment and return to our slides. Okay, moving on to study resources then. As an ACCA student, there are numerous study resources available to you and for you to use now. And research shows us that students who use the following 3 resources perform better in exams. These include examiners' reports, specimen exams, and examining team videos. The examiners' reports contain a lot of valuable guidance for future candidates. As well as containing question debriefs of past exam questions, they also point out the common pitfalls made by students, ones that you will wish to avoid. We believe that the best way to prepare for an exam is question practice using exam standard and style questions. The specimen exams provide this to you. In addition to these, you might consider purchasing practice tests to supplement your question practice. Approved content provider question banks are a source of question practice for you too, and these are reviewed by the examining team on an annual basis to ensure that they provide good preparation for candidates. Specimen exams are available for all applied knowledge exams alongside answers with explanatory notes. So that brings us nearing to the end of the presentation. So we'll just have, in the past few minutes, we'll just have a look at the questions that have come in. So please just give me a moment while we do that, and we'll look at answering as many as we can. Okay, let's start to have a look at these questions. So first one we have here is, do students get a formula sheet during the exam? Yes, they do. You will get access to the formula sheet during the exam. It is available in the CBE platform. So when you start to use the specimen exams and also potentially the practice tests, do have a play around with it. Make sure that you're happy with opening it and using the information that's within it. Next question that we have here, I've done 3 practice tests and also failed my first attempt exam. I find by the time I get to the section B questions, my focus isn't as good and I feel tired. Would you recommend starting with section B first? Okay. Well, I guess our thoughts here would be, have you done the specimen exam just yet? We'd advise doing that and perhaps trying to do section B first, as these may be a drain on your resource. In the exam itself, you might try and take a short break if you need to. That may be something that you want to consider, or taking a minute or a moment to close your eyes. Keeping an eye on the time as well. If you know that you're going to start the exam at a particular time, give yourself just those 36 minutes to have a look at those section B questions, and know that you're going to move on. You're going to move on to section A perhaps after, and if you're able to whip through those a little bit quicker, you can always go back and check what you've done in section B, or move a little bit further through the questions in section B. Lastly, just looking at time, we'll pick one more. How should I increase my chance of passing this exam? Okay. I always come back to question practice. Question practice and debriefing that is the questions that you've gone through is key, particularly for your exam technique. You can perhaps have all the knowledge, but without question practice and going through and marking your work and saying, oh, I didn't get those 2 marks because I made that silly mistake at the end, or that high-low question perhaps that we went through earlier, where it's just perhaps not as straightforward as ones that you may have seen before. Well, if that came up again, you would know how to deal with it. So question practice, I believe, is key. So we're now starting to get closer to 2 p.m. So thank you very much for spending the hour with us today. And I'm just going to pass back to Paul.
Thank you very much indeed, Mikey. And then really, much as I hate to break things up, we really are running out of time. I've got to finish with a massive thank you to my colleague Mikey, and of course to you for your participation. Thank you very much and goodbye.